Oh my God, drag him back!
This morning, tensions remain high in Minneapolis after a weekend of ongoing demonstrations regarding ongoing ICE operations in that city.
The White House has increased scrutiny on Somali communities, particularly in Minnesota, following a fraud scandal that involved some people of Somali descent.
4:41 a.m. What began as a traffic stop becomes a national smuggling scandal. A powerful mayor betrays his city for money and protection. 32 missing children tied to a $420 million trafficking ring, 1.5 tons of heroin, fentanyl, and synthetic compounds entering America. Do you want the truth they never wanted exposed? Click like, I will uncover it all. At 4:41 a.m., along Park Avenue South, the historic district of Minneapolis froze in a suspicious silence. Soft porch lights illuminated Victorian homes against freshly fallen snow. Inside, families slept peacefully, unaware that the balance of their city was about to shift, and that change came without warning. No sirens, no announcement. Then, just beyond the street, the silence was shattered. A long line of black armored SUVs rolled in without sirens, headlights flooding the entire block. More than 350 federal agents from the FBI and Immigration and Customs Enforcement moved out, wearing heavy body armor, carrying ballistic shields and night vision goggles. They took their positions with synchronized precision, like a military assault unit. No shouting, no warnings, only boots crunching on ice and radios whispering numbers. This was not a routine police patrol. This was a coordinated federal strike. Their target was not a desert cartel, nor a gang hiding in an industrial zone. Before them stood a massive private estate, perfectly trimmed hedges, freshly cleared walkways, a home that looked entirely by the book. It belonged to a sitting Somali mayor, Mahad Nur Osman, 45, recently entrusted with oversight of public safety and a city budget exceeding $1.8 billion. At 4:52 a.m., the order was given. The silence exploded as a flashbang detonated in the front entryway. Glass shattered. Federal voices thundered. Federal agents, search warrant, drop your weapons. The neighborhood jolted awake as shattering glass and shouted commands tore through the night. What happened next sent chills through federal commanders. This was no panicked homeowner. Inside, agents encountered 26 armed bodyguards, positioned throughout hallways and stairwells like a private army. That number alone triggered alarm bells. No U.S. mayor requires that level of protection in a private residence. Whatever was hidden here was valuable enough to be worth killing for. In under 10 minutes, the house was secured. Then came the discovery. Behind a false wall in the basement, drug stockpiles and 32 children trapped in a prostitution ring. Evidence teams uncovered documents and traces capable of exposing and potentially dismantling the entire machinery of city governance. What you are about to witness is not a single scandal. It is the opening move of a takedown, where elected power is alleged to have become a tool of a smuggling network engineered from within. And this morning was only the beginning. If you believe a powerful figure stands behind this multinational smuggling network, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and comment "exposed" to continue following the truth being buried. To understand why that house was protected like a fortress, investigators had to rewind the clock. He was seen as a pillar of the Somali community, a man who grew up in poverty and rose to become a symbol of integration, reform, and transparent governance. He appeared at public ceremonies, signed budget packages, and spoke about safety and social justice. But now, federal agents allege that the title of mayor was merely a cover. The raid on Park Avenue South was not random. It began exactly 24 hours earlier, with a chaotic scene that looked no different from a viral social media clip, and the two events were connected. History repeated itself on the afternoon of January 7th. A patrol unit stopped a vehicle driven by Renee Good, a 37-year-old local woman. The encounter escalated quickly. Bystanders recorded her shouting that she had rights, that the stop was illegal. The video spread almost instantly, drawing millions of views. Many comments called it harassment. They called it an abuse of power. But the camera didn't see what was in the trunk. When agents opened the rear cargo compartment, the entire narrative collapsed. Inside, tightly wrapped in thick black plastic, were 100 kilograms of powdered fentanyl, intended to be pressed into counterfeit prescription pills and distributed across the United States. Beside it sat $3.1 million in cash, vacuum-sealed and bundled so tightly it still smelled of machine oil. That single vehicle carried enough poison to wipe out an entire region. During interrogation, she didn't talk at first, but the data did. Investigators analyzed travel logs and unusually volatile financial records. They discovered she wasn't working for street-level dealers. Her movements aligned with disturbing precision to contract signings, permit approvals, and closed-door meetings inside the mayor's office. The Financial Crimes Unit then uncovered evidence that could not be denied. Over 5 years, $420 million had been cycled through shell accounts indirectly linked to the power network surrounding this mayor. Stop and think about that number. $420 million, more than 3,600% above standard public sector earnings. There is no legal pathway for an elected official to accumulate wealth on that scale. The money flowed across 3 continents, Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia, with timing that matched key decisions on licensing, zoning, and logistical protection. When businesses tied to the drug pipeline needed a safe corridor, processes were accelerated, files were skipped, oversight vanished. This mayor wasn't just looking the other way, he was taking payment. Federal command realized they were not dealing with an ordinary corrupt official. They were facing a high-level coordinator, someone using the administrative power of the mayor's office to guarantee safe passage for large-scale drug shipments. But one critical problem remained. They knew he was the head of the snake. What they didn't know was where the body was hidden among civilians. A residential home could not hold tons of narcotics, and that's when the task force deployed its secret weapon. If you believe the truth behind the mayor's house is not the end, but a cover for something deeper, comment, explore. Your support strengthens the resolve of U.S. federal authorities. Federal command accepted a reality that could no longer be ignored. The house itself was not the destination. It was only a doorway. 3 hours before dawn, a specialized surveillance unit launched high-altitude thermal imaging drones over the mayor's property. These systems are rarely deployed over private residential neighborhoods. In the past decade, fewer than 2% of federal domestic investigations have required their use. What appeared on the monitors immediately proved the decision was justified. Behind the detached garage, the frozen ground glowed. At 6:27 a.m., personnel cleared snow and debris behind the garage. Hidden beneath a reinforced concrete slab was a hydraulic lift system, its seams camouflaged with materials identical to city sidewalk paving. When activated, the platform slid back almost silently, revealing a tunnel entrance reinforced wide enough to move cargo, not people. What lay beneath was not an escape route. It was infrastructure. The tunnel descended more than 12 meters, reinforced with steel frames and concrete walls rated to withstand loads exceeding 60 tons. LED lighting ran the entire length of the passage. Ventilation shafts fed into industrial filtration units. Power lines were routed through shielded conduits, connected to a private electrical grid, bypassing municipal oversight entirely. As agents expanded their search, the scale of the operation became undeniable. This was not a house. It was a logistics hub disguised as a mansion. In a guest bedroom behind a false wall, they discovered 900 kilograms of narcotics, stacked like gold bars. Agents forced open an inner compartment containing 32 children, sedated and restrained to prevent noise or movement. Deeper in the basement, metal crates held an additional 1.5 tons of heroin, fentanyl, and synthetic compounds. And then there was the money. Suitcases, containers, and floor safes were packed with cash. When counting was complete, the total seized from the residence alone reached $105 million, an amount large enough to destabilize a local economy. But the most critical discovery was not the cash or the drugs. It was what lay deeper beneath the frozen ground, concealing a human trafficking network. Agents moved to the detached garage, where anomalous heat signatures persisted. Snow and debris were cleared, exposing another hydraulic lift hidden in the floor. When activated, the concrete slabs slid away, revealing a vast reinforced tunnel entrance. By 7:11 a.m., Federal Command issued a Tier 3 classification upgrade. This was no longer a corruption case. It was an underground logistics network embedded within civilian life. The tunnel extended deep beneath the property, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and conveyor systems. It was a command bunker engineered to survive war. Ask yourself this: if a sitting mayor can build a fortress like this in the heart of an American city without anyone noticing, how many other trusted homes were never meant to be discovered? Tap, like if you demand transparency from every public official. While physical evidence was being cataloged, another battle was unfolding upstairs. The cyber warfare unit was racing against time. 5 encrypted computers had been seized from the mayor's private office. They were still active. The screens were black, but the hard drives were running. Analysts knew they had only minutes left before encryption keys rotated or a remote kill switch wiped everything clean. Using forensic overwrite countermeasures, they successfully froze the system state. What appeared on the screens made their faces go pale. These machines weren't just tracking inventory in the basement. They were connected to a live network monitoring shipments across the entire state. Investigators contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office to determine why the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, had previously been denied access. Every data trail led to a single destination, the seaport. The files revealed a list of customs clearance codes and override procedures used continuously for 6 years. 17 specific port officials, men whose names appeared in no public records, had repeatedly bypassed security checks on designated containers. They did not forge documents. They used legitimate credentials to move contraband. Agents grasped the horrifying truth. The judge was not merely a local crime boss. He was the gatekeeper. His house was the brain. The tunnels were storage, but the port was the mouth of the monster. This network had created a ghost corridor. Illegal shipments were unloaded from international vessels, cleared customs in under 9 minutes, and disappeared into the American interior before anyone even knew they had arrived. The lead investigator stared at the timestamp on the screen. The next major shipment was scheduled to clear in less than 2 hours. There was no time for a briefing, no time for contingency planning. The tactical commander grabbed the radio. He didn't order a withdrawal. He ordered a redeployment. As the sun began to rise over the docks, 250 federal agents sprinted toward their vehicles. The raid on the house was over. The fight for control of the port was about to begin. At 8:22 a.m., the port complex was just beginning to stir. Massive cranes stood motionless, fog slowly lifting off the water. Officially, ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement units, were present to conduct routine enforcement operations targeting illegal immigration at the state and national levels. And in this case, those operations were indeed underway. But the convoy of black SUVs racing toward Gate 4 was about to change everything. Federal task forces didn't wait for clearance. They smashed through security barriers, tires screaming across wet asphalt. Surprise was their only advantage. If the port network learned the mayor was in custody, the evidence would sink to the bottom of the ocean within minutes. Agents split into 3 waves. Alpha Team secured the customs offices. Bravo Team swept the bonded warehouses. Charlie Team stormed the waterfront, targeting Warehouse C, the exact location marked in the judge's encrypted files. Resistance came immediately. Armed guards suddenly emerged from behind stacked shipping containers, firing wildly at advancing agents. Gunfire echoed off the steel hulls of docked ships. But without the element of surprise, the defensive force was quickly overwhelmed. Federal marksmen neutralized the threat, forcing surrender in under 7 minutes. When agents cut the locks on Warehouse C, the scale of the operation finally stunned them. The facility was officially registered as a cold storage warehouse for frozen agricultural products. But behind stacks of lettuce and seafood, they uncovered a narcotics vault. Sealed crates were stacked 3 levels high, packaged for domestic distribution. 1 ton of heroin, 900 kilograms of fentanyl, massive quantities of synthetic compounds. This was not a single shipment. This was a regional distribution hub for the entire Midwest. While tactical teams seized the drugs, financial investigators raided administrative offices overlooking the port. Federal presence across the metropolitan area was overwhelming, and Operation Urban Surge received strong public support. Others were furious. Officials, including Governor Tim Walz, demanded answers. Investigators were hunting the so-called Dirty 17, the officials named in the judge's records. They found them. Or rather, they found the price they had been paid. Files seized from office safes contained approval histories. Every illegal shipment had been authorized by the same small group. Banking records confirmed the betrayal. Each official received monthly transfers ranging from $380,000 to $1.9 million, routed through the same shell companies that paid the judge. They didn't just look the other way, they sold the keys to the gate. By 9:03 a.m., Minneapolis was no longer running on routine. It was running on damage control. Within 40 minutes of the port seizure, Federal Command issued an emergency continuity directive. City Hall was placed under a silent lockdown, not with tape and barricades, but with authority. No press briefings, no public memos. All senior administrators were ordered to remain at their desks. Elevators were frozen between floors. Network access was throttled citywide. By 9:47 a.m., federal technicians had begun cloning municipal servers, capturing more than 68 terabytes of data tied to permits, zoning approvals, procurement contracts, and discretionary grants dating back 8 years. The numbers were staggering. Preliminary audits flagged 1,142 contracts for irregular approval timelines, some signed in under 12 minutes, a speed impossible under normal compliance rules. Financial analysts traced $2.3 billion in accelerated public spending tied to just 27 signatures, most of them issued during late-night windows between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. This was not negligence, it was choreography. By mid-morning, the shockwaves hit the workforce. 312 city employees were quietly separated for interviews. 48 were escorted out immediately. 9 department heads submitted resignations before noon, each citing health reasons. One never made it home. At 11:18 a.m., a senior procurement officer was found dead in a downtown parking structure. Authorities called it a fall. Investigators called it inconclusive. Federal commanders called it expected. The list known internally as the Dirty 17 began to fracture. 2 names pinged border alerts within hours. One attempted to charter a private flight using a shell company registered 6 days earlier. Another wiped 3 phones and a laptop before agents arrived. Too late. Digital forensics recovered 94% of the data. The money trails were unmistakable. Monthly transfers ranging from $380,000 to $1.9 million routed through the same offshore layers used to pay the mayor. Over 72 months, the combined total exceeded $610 million. Public reaction split the city down the middle. By early afternoon, emergency calls spiked 41% as protests formed near government buildings. Some held signs accusing federal agencies of staging a coup. Others demanded mass arrests. For residents over 60, the shock cut deeper. Many had lived through decades of civic trust, school bonds, infrastructure votes, neighborhood grants. Now they learned that the same systems had been hollowed out from within. At 2:36 p.m., the Department of Justice issued a rare instruction. All administrative signatures related to logistics, licensing, and federal funds were frozen statewide. The freeze affected $4.8 billion in active projects. Contractors stopped work. Payrolls paused. The city did not grind to a halt. It seized. Behind closed doors, commanders delivered the grim assessment. The house was not an anomaly. The port was not the prize. What had been exposed was a governance model, one that monetized authority at scale. The mayor's residence had been a showroom. The tunnels were storage. The port was distribution. City Hall had been the switchboard. By nightfall, one truth was undeniable. This was not a single scandal to be patched with resignations and reforms. It was a systemic breach measured in billions, executed over years, and protected by titles the public had trusted. And as federal lights burned late inside municipal offices, one warning circulated through command channels. If this network could survive in plain sight here, it did not end here. By the time night settled over Minneapolis, the most disturbing evidence from the mansion had not yet been spoken aloud. At 9:42 p.m., the 32 children rescued from beneath the mayor's property were transferred under armed escort to a sealed federal medical facility. No press, no names, no photographs. Their existence was logged under a single designation: Priority Human Integrity Case. For many of the agents involved, some with more than 25 years of service, this was the first time they had seen that classification used on U.S. soil. Initial medical assessments delivered a shock that silenced the room. The children ranged in age from 6 to 14. All showed signs of prolonged transport, pressure bruising consistent with restraints, dehydration markers, and traces of sedatives designed to suppress movement and memory. Doctors noted synchronized medical alterations, vaccination records that did not match federal databases, dental work performed in batches, and identical gaps in educational history spanning 18 to 36 months. These were not accidents, they were edits. When federal child protection analysts cross-referenced the data, patterns emerged fast. 26 of the 32 children appeared in federal systems at some point: school enrollment, healthcare access, or social services, before vanishing. Each disappearance had been processed legally. Files were closed. Oversight boxes were checked. No alarms were triggered. Over 5 years, the system had quietly erased them. The names of institutions repeated like an echo: community learning centers, transitional care programs, youth advancement grants. On paper, they were legitimate. They had received more than $210 million in combined federal and state funding. Inspectors had signed off, audits had passed, yet site visits revealed empty buildings, locked doors, or addresses that led to vacant lots. These were ghost institutions, authorized, funded, and never meant to protect anyone. By 11:18 p.m., the FBI confirmed the scope had exploded beyond Minnesota. Matching identifiers surfaced in 11 states stretching from the Midwest to the East Coast. Children were being moved across jurisdictions using perfectly legal transport permits escorted by contractors paid with public money. In one internal briefing, an analyst summarized it bluntly. The system didn't fail. It worked exactly as it was manipulated to. The emotional toll hit hard. Veteran agents, some grandparents themselves, requested relief after reviewing interview summaries. One senior investigator stated on record that in 3 decades of service, he had never encountered a case where administrative paperwork had caused this level of harm. The files were clean. The consequences were not. At 1:07 a.m., federal leadership authorized the creation of a new national database, quietly, without announcement. The National Child Integrity File would consolidate records from education, healthcare, immigration, and social services, retroactively scanning 22 years of data. The goal was simple and chilling: find the children who had disappeared without noise. Early projections were grim. Based on sampling models, analysts estimated that the 32 children recovered represented less than 8% of the total network footprint. If accurate, the real number would exceed 400 children nationwide. As dawn approached, one truth settled over the task force like a weight. The tunnels, the drugs, the money. They were crimes of greed. But the files on the children exposed something colder. A system that had learned how to hide human lives inside bureaucratic silence. And as the first names were entered into the new database, one question echoed through the command center. If 32 were found by chance, how many were lost by design? By the morning after the children were secured, federal investigators accepted a conclusion they had been avoiding. The network did not stop in Minneapolis. It climbed. At 6:18 a.m., forensic accountants completed the first consolidated financial map. What they saw ended any remaining debate. The money flowing through the mayor's shell accounts did not disperse randomly. It moved upward, layer by layer, through consulting firms, nonprofit foundations, and legal trusts registered in Washington, D.C. Of the $610 million already documented, more than $287 million continued past state-level intermediaries and entered entities operating within 3 blocks of Capitol Hill. No indictments were issued, not yet. Metadata embedded in archived emails revealed something more dangerous than direct orders: coordination, policy delays, quiet exemptions, investigations redirected. Over an 8-year period, at least 19 federal inquiries involving trafficking, narcotics, or missing minors were paused, narrowed, or closed entirely after jurisdictional reassessment. Each decision appeared reasonable on paper. Together, they formed a shield. At 9:41 a.m., a sealed briefing reached a select congressional oversight subgroup. Only 9 members were cleared to receive it. The document did not accuse. It outlined timelines, transaction corridors, and synchronized legislative inaction. One analyst summarized it in a single sentence: this network did not buy politicians, it rented silence. The most alarming discovery came last. A national policy database showed that funding formulas benefiting the ghost institutions linked to the children had been renewed 4 times, each renewal passing without floor debate. The cumulative value exceeded $1.2 billion. No objections, no amendments, no questions. By afternoon, a special federal review body was activated without a public name. Its mandate was narrow and explosive: trace authority, not just money. Determine who had the power to stop this and chose not to. For Americans over 60, the realization cut deep. Many had grown up believing corruption was loud, reckless, and visible. What this case revealed was something else entirely: corruption that wore suits, followed procedure, and hid behind patience. As investigators prepared their next move, one conclusion hardened across command channels: when a city is controlled underground, the real danger is not who built the tunnels, but who signed the papers that allowed them to exist.